let's move on to some different examples of discussion groups that you could use in the classroom. And this isn't an extensive list. I mean, it's 6 very good examples of how you can add discussion. And most of us will think of the, not the first one, but the blue one that says reading discussions. I mean, that's probably the most popular type of discussion that you will have in a blended learning class or even in an online class or even face-to-face. But one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that any face-to-face class that incorporates these online features by taking the discussions outside of the class, you're significantly enhancing that course by doing so. Okay, so let's talk about these 6 different effective ways to structure online asynchronous discussions. All right, so first you can start with having student facilitators. So what you can do is you can have maybe 5 different discussions going on throughout the semester. And what you can do is assign 2 students to facilitate those different discussions. So maybe in the first part of the semester you have 2 students that are responsible, everyone else is participating in the discussion, and then later everybody will eventually get their chance to be the facilitator. So the first 2 will then be in charge of making sure that the students that are participating in this discussion are participating in the manner that is outlined in the syllabus. They're making sure that the students stay in line with the objectives. And it's good that the students stay in the same group, so they're paired up to make sure that they all get an opportunity to be the facilitator. So when they're participating, they might have minimal posting requirements, as the rest of the class will be required to post more. But the facilitators, you want to make sure that it's clear how many times that they have to post and what their job is when they are posting. So they follow the discussion. They also are expected to summarize the key points of the entire discussion and then critique the discussion process at the end. So they may be graded, the facilitators, after their participation as the facilitator. So they might have a grade in the book that other students don't have yet. But eventually everyone will get a chance to be the facilitator, and they will also get a chance to get that grade. Okay, so you have these groups, and you can also do it in smaller groups because the discussions seem to be easier to manage and also more meaningful when the groups aren't just the whole class participating. So if you have smaller groups and the students are summarizing and facilitating the smaller groups, it can make it easier for them to bring out the key issues that were raised and to critique the communication aspect of that discussion. Okay? So basically this requires their reflective analysis of both the content and process of that discussion that they're participating in. Okay, next is the Fishbowl Technique. And the Fishbowl Technique is an alternative discussion strategy. And the way it works is one group of students, they will be considered the fishbowl. These participants are participating in the discussion, and everyone else, and what they're discussing is visible to all the students to see. Well, let me talk about how you would do it in class first if you're not familiar with it. Basically, you set up a circle in the middle of your classroom with about 4 or 5 chairs, and those students are the fish, and they're in the fishbowl. So they sit in the circle and they discuss some important concepts that you're teaching in the class. And everyone else is sitting around the room just listening and taking notes as they discuss. So when you take that outside the class and put it online, basically the same thing happens, but the students are discussing in a discussion forum, and everyone else can see all of their posts. So while the other students are assigned to read the post, they can communicate privately with their assigned groups or with each other outside of that fishbowl. Okay, so the students also, or outside, also provide suggestions. They can raise issues, and then they can also later report back to the instructor what evidence that they found or what the results of their observation of that discussion were. And in that way, the instructor can not only award points for the fish in the bowl, but they can also award points for the students outside that were participating by listening to the discussion. Okay, next is the student-generated questions. So this is also a good technique for developing discussions. I like to look at it as a FAQ, but a little more directed. I mean, if you just call it an FAQ, you're going to get all kinds of questions. But with this, again, you can do teams, and the teams can be responsible for writing questions, and then those questions can be exchanged with another team, and then that team is responsible for answering the questions. So you can do it where you choose a different team each week to write questions. If you have an even number of teams, it's helpful that they can then just swap the questions, and then for the next week's discussions, you can flip-flop them. And I think not choosing one of these techniques, but choosing different, not all, but several different techniques changes up what the students are doing as they are participating online in these discussions. So asking student-generated questions is a very good process. Okay, next is the reading discussion, the most popular one. And basically the way it works is you assign reading, and then you also assign discussion questions, and then students focus on the applied course content as they discuss the questions that you provided for them. And then, of course, it allows students to relate to personal experiences and understanding. So you're asking for students to relate what they know in their own experiences and in their own lives to what it is that they're reading and discussing in class. And like I said, that's the most common type of discussion that you'll see. Okay, next is reciprocal teaching. And this one's very valuable. You can see the sort of outline process that happens here where students are summarizing, they're question generating, they're clarifying, they're predicting, all in this process of reciprocal teaching. So basically it's an effective reading comprehension technique, and it's designed to foster interactive reading of challenging articles. So I'm sure that you'll be providing students with articles to read that they might find challenging, so you can set these up as reciprocal teaching. So everyone in the group reads the same article, or it could be a book or any other source that you provide, and then students are assigned different types of questions or responsibilities that help them to comprehend or to help the others in the group learn that content. So you have a questioner, and the questioner will post questions that focus upon key details, okay, that are explicitly within the text. And then that student may ask opinion questions related to that text idea. Then you have another role that could be a clarifier, and then the clarifier would inquire about ideas in the text that require greater clarification. Then you could have a role that would be what we call a finder, and the finder is the person who finds additional resources and locates supplemental resources. They also are responsible for describing the connection between these new resources that they found and the original source that they're reading, and of course they would post that so everyone can see it. You could have a role of someone who's a summarizer, and then they articulate the main ideas of the passage, or also the important supporting details that are provided in the article as well, and then they provide that information to the group. So it's a good way to handle a difficult resource that you want for students to learn from, and as these groups, again, work together, they each have an assigned role that can help them support the active learning within not just a group, but a social academic context in a sense. They feel like they're helping each other. All right, so the last one is research and current events. So one of the things that you can do for a discussion is assign students to connect course content to published research or current events that are happening in your discipline today. So you assign the groups to go out, find this content, and then bring it back and post it into a discussion forum and have them discuss what has been provided to the class. You can also have them vote on ones that they find to be the most interesting and then have the discussion revolve around that. Okay, so one key thing that you want to make sure that you do is you want to make sure that you evaluate student performance. So I talked about it already earlier, but if you're not evaluating the performance, then the performance starts to degrade. You want to make sure that you give meaningful feedback, and the most important is make sure that it is a prompt. So effective online discussions, it requires that instructors determine the group size that we talked about, but also the role of the individuals in the discussions. We talked about that also. But they also must develop key discussion guidelines, and they want to model effective practices as well, and then be sure to critique student discussion postings. So when assessing student postings, you want to make sure that you have a well-defined rubric so that students know exactly what it is that they will be graded on. So the rubric should be tailored to the academic content of the course. There are a lot of generic rubrics out there, and a lot of times it's not specific enough. And what happens is it turns into this, you get a certain amount of points for the number of posts that you post. So, for instance, I'll have students reply back to me when they don't get full credit. Their first response is, yeah, but I posted 5 times. You said I had to post 5 times. And that, that was only one small part of the rubric. They completely ignored all of the very specific things that they were supposed to say when they posted. So I think that will help you with your evaluation if you have a very clear rubric.